Great. So I want to start with this premise. I want to start with the premise that I have said often, that the Bible is actually, reading the Bible is a bit like watching a series. So I want you to think of your favorite TV series or Netflix series. Imagine that there's 10 seasons, and you have watched all 10 seasons 3 or 4 times, and you know everything that goes on in this series. And then you discover that your best friend has never watched this ever, right? And so they happen to come home, and you are watching series 10, episode 5, and you say, "Oh, come watch with me." Think about how these two people are going to experience that series, right? So you might be laughing at all the jokes and thinking about, oh, actually they said this, and in season 3, this is what happened. You'll be thinking of the character development. And what about your friend? Your friend's watching the show, maybe they'll enjoy it, and it's a good show, so they'll laugh at the jokes, but they may not catch everything. And that's still fine, right? But that person would actually enjoy the show so much more if they watched from season 1 onwards, right? And so today we're going to explore a story in the Bible, and it's going to feel a lot like that. For some of us, it's going to be a completely new story, and I hope that you enjoy it as much as I do. I hope that you put down your questions, say, who is this person, why are they here, which season did they come into the story, and ask those questions. And after this is over, ask around, ask people, oh, what's your favorite part of this series, right? What's your favorite part of the Bible? For some of us, it's going to feel like, oh, it's the same episode over and over again. And you've listened to the story 100 times. And I encourage you to start thinking about the patterns. Start thinking about the connections and say, oh, if this is here, what is it saying about what happened in the past? What is it saying about what is going to happen in the future? We've been talking about the miracles of Jesus, and the question is, why miracles? Why are there miracles in the Bible in the first place? What is it trying to tell us? We can read these miracles in isolation, and we can be amazed by them and think, okay, this is a great story. But the Bible is meant for us to read in connection. There's a beauty in the callbacks that these stories are making. There are memes, there are literary tropes that happen in these stories. There are repetitions of ideas and jokes, and we are meant to look back. And so if we look across the Bible, we might be tempted to think that the entire Bible is about these fantastical, weird, paranormal stories. But the reality is, it isn't. It's just that those stories stand out, so we remember them. There are about 260 odd passages with miracles. That's only about 5% of the text. So it seems like a miracle is an exception rather than the rule. God seems to work in default, he seems to work within the story of human timeline, within the laws of nature and the social laws and political laws. But at the same time, we must not forget the fact that when I'm using the word miracle, I'm talking about something that is extraordinary. But there is also this miracle of the ordinary. The fact that the sun rose this morning is a miracle. The fact that I woke up this morning is a miracle. I went to sleep last night. I didn't choose to wake up. I didn't make any effort to wake up. I just woke up. The fact that my heart is beating is a miracle. I'm not choosing to do that. I'm not making the effort. It is God who is sustaining the life within me. So the ordinary itself is miraculous. And we see that we might have periods of our lives where we don't see anything that is extraordinary. But the fact is that the absence of the miraculous is not a sign of God's distance. God works in our everyday lives. We see this in the Bible. There are some characters who don't seem to see any miraculous signs. These are main characters. Think about King David. He's this guy who's probably in the top 3 or 4 main characters in the first part of the Bible. Extremely God-filled life, very dramatic life. And there is no record of any sort of miraculous event in his life. Everything that God did was within the laws of nature, within his skill sets and the skill around him and the political and social laws. And there are others like that, Solomon, Ruth, Nehemiah, Esther, who don't record anything that we would think is extraordinary, out of the ordinary. So something doesn't need to be paranormal for it to be a work of God. We shouldn't feel like we're doing something wrong if we don't experience anything that's weird or out of the ordinary. The normal and mundane is in itself God-filled moments. But also there is a real danger in chasing after the shiny, dramatic, extraordinary events and assuming that that is the only place that God is working. Now, having said all of that, there are still a lot of miracles in the Bible. And that's what we're looking at. There is an interesting pattern that happens. You may not be able to see the axes over there, but what you have on the x-axis down is the books of the Bible, and then the y-axis is the number of verses. And so you see the number of verses that are to do with miracles across the Bible. And there are some interesting patterns that start emerging, is that the miracles happen in groups, and they're clustered around different books. What it seems like is the miracles are associated with moments of massive revelation of God. And so we see a lot of miracles at creation, at Exodus, which is this fundamental story in the Bible, when the prophets emerge because they're revealing God's plan ahead, his actual plan for life and for humanity. And then at the time of Jesus, when Jesus comes and there are the Gospels. And so we are zooming into that one part of the Bible. There are 66 books in the Bible. Only 4 of them are actually dealing with the story of Jesus, even though he is the main character across the Bible. But these 4 focus on his life on earth. They're written by eyewitnesses to Jesus, and they're typical of an eyewitness report. Which means that what we're going to see also is the same story written by 4 different people with slight variances because it's based on their personality, based on what stands out to them, even though it's the same story. Even within the Gospels, the miracles are put at strategic points of time. Because these guys are not writing as historians, they're writing to tell a story. And so the miracle is often coupled with a teaching, with a revelation of who God is. The miracle is like shining a light saying, pay attention to this moment. I'm going to show you an example. One of the stories has Jesus walk on water. Sounds fantastical, sounds brilliant. The question is, why did he walk on water? Like, what is the point of that? Sure, it's a great story and like you might be impressed. It's like people don't normally walk on water, but why did he walk on water? Is it just a party trick? And if it was a party trick and he's trying to prove that he's God, then surely he could do something better than walk on water, right? So why did he walk on water? But more interestingly, when we see the story, at the end of this, the disciples worshipped him. And we should stop and say, oh, that's a bit odd. Why did they worship him? I'll tell you why that's a bit odd. Because Jesus wasn't the first person to do a miracle in this story. All of the people around had heard stories of all the prophets in the past who did incredible miracles, right? So there was these stories much before Jesus' time of Elisha and Elijah, and they did miracles like causing a drought, healing a person with leprosy, raising someone from the dead, calling fire down from heaven. They multiplied food. Those are things that the prophets did before Jesus. and nobody tried to worship them. So these disciples of Jesus are God-fearing Jews who know better than to worship a human. So why did they worship Jesus when he walked on water? I want to show you this because you start to see patterns. We'll start to see callbacks. This is the passage in Matthew 14. After Jesus had dismissed this big crowd, he went up on a mountainside by himself. Later that night, he was there alone, and the boat was already in the water. The disciples had gone there. There were waves and wind. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. The disciples saw him. They were afraid of him. They thought he was a ghost. Jesus said, "Take courage, it's me." Peter says, "Lord, if it's you, let me walk on the water." He goes out, he sinks, and then, or almost sinks. Jesus protects him. When Peter saw the wind, he was afraid, and he helped him up, and then they climbed back into the boat, and the wind died down, and those in the boat worshipped him. A bit of a strange story. What is so extraordinary over here? Yes, sure, it broke the laws of nature. Anyone thinking of previous seasons? I've highlighted a few words over here strategically. Any callbacks to a story much, much before this? I'm going to show you a few hints. Whenever you hear the phrase "go up on a mountainside," the author is talking about one story. Moses, and that story of Moses is going even further back. Whenever you see the phrase "go up on a mountainside," the author is asking us, think back to the Garden of Eden. Why? The Garden of Eden was this garden that was placed on top of a mountain out of which 4 rivers flowed out. It's the space where God and man met. It's the space where humans can walk with God and have perfect relationship with God. If you miss that, look at the next 2 things. Later that night, shortly before dawn. What does that remind you of? In the first page of the Bible, it says, there was evening, there was morning. And so the author is trying to provide you hints saying, I'm telling you a story, and I want you to think back to season 1, episode 1, Genesis 1. The very first verses of your Bible says this: "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters." And he said, "Let there be light," and there was light, and he separated the waters from the water, and this chaotic, abysmal formlessness and void and darkness, and the Spirit of God hovered over that, and he gathered the chaotic waters together, and dry ground emerged from it. Why did the disciples worship? It's not because this was some party trick of Jesus walking on water. They worshipped him because they recognized in this moment that he is worthy of worship. Why? Because he is the one who was there at the beginning. He is the eternal, immortal, Alpha and Omega, beginning and the end. He is the one who hovered over the waters, who calmed the raging sea, who can take that which is formless and void and bring order out of chaos. He is the one who can stare into the darkness in our lives and speak light into existence. He is the one who can gather up chaotic waters, anxiety, depression, chaos, violence in our lives, and cause dry land to come out to give beauty and life to emerge. That is why he is worthy of worship. That is why those in the boat worshipped him, and they said, "Truly, you are the Son of God. So the question is, why are there miracles in the Bible? This is what John says. John says Jesus performed many other miracles that his disciples saw. Those miracles are not written in this book. But these miracles have been written so that you will believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and so that you will have life by believing in him. So when we see the miracles, sure, it's brilliant. Like, it's a great story, something amazing happened. But our question should always be, what is this trying to say? What is the story behind the story? In the Bible, in the Gospels, those 4 books talking about Jesus, there are 37 recorded miracles that Jesus performed. You don't have to read these, but I'm just giving you an idea of how they're spread across the different books. Many of them are repeated across the books. The one that we're looking at today is number 36. It's the last miracle that Jesus performed before he died. And I want to give you some story. It's a story of the healing of Malchus's ear. So here's the context. It's towards the end of Jesus' life. He has spent 3 years with his disciples. He's gone around explaining who he is, what he's here for. It's during a time of the biggest festival of the year. Imagine Chinese New Year or Diwali or Thanksgiving. Everybody in the whole world is traveling around to go home and celebrate. It's a bit like that, right? So this is thousands of Jews are coming from around the world to celebrate this festival. Jesus knows he's going to be crucified in this week. He goes to the disciples, he shares a meal with them. During this meal, he inaugurates his new mission. He's trying to tell the disciples, this is the new way of how you are going to connect with God. You're going to connect with God through me. And then he goes to a garden of Gethsemane. It's this place where he goes often to pray, but this time he goes with his disciples. And he is in incredible agony and pain and anguish because he knows he is going to be crucified. He knows he is going to be tormented and tortured and killed. And so he prays to God saying, please take this away from me. And 3 times he says, if you can, or if you want to, take this away from me. But not my will, but your will be done. And so he recognizes in this moment that God's will is the most important thing. And in this moment, it's late at night, it's in the middle of the night, it's dark, it's foggy, the disciples are fast asleep. A group of soldiers come and various people, a big crowd with weapons, and they've come to arrest Jesus. We were singing, a lot of the songs we sang this morning was really about that story. One of the people who came with that crowd was Judas, who used to be one of his followers, and he was betraying him in that moment. So that's the context. For a moment, just imagine if you're in that space. Think about the chaos, the sounds. It's dark, it's foggy, you suddenly hear this rattling of weapons. The disciples are afraid, they're probably trying to run away, find an escape route. The heightened emotions in that moment. That's the context, and we're going to read this story now. We're going to read it 4 times because it's recorded 4 times. And each time you will notice something new. The men seized Jesus and arrested him. Then one of those standing near drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. Am I leading a rebellion, said Jesus, that you have come out with swords and clubs to capture me? Every day I was with you teaching in the temple courts, and you did not arrest me. But the scriptures must be fulfilled. Then everyone deserted him and fled. Few things just to point out in the story. when there's a group of people with weapons, and if you have a sword, you don't just go neatly and cut somebody's ear off like that. Okay? So what that means is that the person was trying to split the guy's skull open or chop his head off. It was an attack. And the people on the other side, they had weapons as well, right? So they're not going to stand by and wait for you to cut their ear off. Okay? So it was a violent attack. Second thing to point out is Jesus did not resist arrest. He did not try to fight back. But in this story, we don't see anything else. Okay? After this, they arrest him. How do we know who used the sword, who cut the ear, whose ear it was? We have no idea. So we look at the other eyewitness report. In Matthew, it says, with that, one of Jesus' companions reached for his sword, drew it out, and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. What's something new here immediately? We know it was one of Jesus' companions. The previous one just said somebody standing by. We don't know who did it. Okay? One of Jesus' companions. And Jesus says to him, put your sword back in its place, Jesus said to him. For all who draw the sword will die by the sword. Do you think I cannot call on my Father, and he will at once put at my disposal more than 12 legions of angels? But how then would the scriptures be fulfilled that say it must happen in this way? As soon as the author represents that it was one of Jesus's companions, he also couples that with Jesus' response to that person. He chastises him for the act of violence. Then Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant, cutting off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. So you see how each of these stories are fitting together, and we learn more and more through each of those stories. We know who was holding the sword. We know whose ear got cut off. We don't know how the others responded yet. They had weapons. Why didn't they attack back? But we see Jesus diffusing the situation. Jesus commanded Peter, put your sword away. Shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me? And then the soldiers with its commanders arrested Jesus. What's missing in these three stories? The healing. Okay, good. So I left the best for the last. Fourth version of the same story. When Jesus' followers saw what was going to happen, they said, Lord, should we strike with our swords? And one of them struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his right ear. What stands out in those two sentences? They asked, they didn't wait for a response. They asked Jesus and then said, okay, I'm going to do my own thing anyway. And how often we do that as well. But Jesus answered, no more of this, and he touched the man's ear and healed him. And so that's the story. There are three characters, and I want to bring out a few things from it. The first character is Malchus. Think for a moment of this. There are many stories of Jesus healing people. But think about what's going through the minds of the disciples. There's a group of people who have obviously come to do harm to Jesus. They've come with weapons. What is the response supposed to be? Either you fight back or you run. You don't go there and help the people who are trying to attack you. That makes no sense. But think of that. We've looked at so many stories. Jesus healed people who were from his own community, the Jews. And then he started healing people from other communities, and they were like, oh, okay, maybe they are also included in this plan. And last week, we looked at this incredible story of Jesus healing a person who is completely outcast by society. Someone who is downtrodden, who is the bottom of the rung, people who we would not look at. And Jesus saying, no, this person is also part of this plan. This person is also included. And then he goes in one instance and he heals a Roman centurion servant. And it's weird. Imagine that you're in a place, there's a foreign military power who is brutal, who is extremely violent, who is harming all of your people, why are you helping that person? And Jesus says, no, that person's also allowed. And his last miracle before he is killed is to say, no, the very people who are against me, the very people who have come to harm me, my plan is for them as well. And this culminates in him when he is dying on the cross. He says, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. What does that mean for us? Jesus is demonstrating yet again that his gift is for all people. It's available for all people. It doesn't matter. It's regardless of our background, our ethnicity, our name, our family, our socio-economic status, our nationality, what language we speak, what food we eat, how we dress. It doesn't matter. There is no barrier of religion or gender or age or status or any other grouping that society imposes on us. There is no barrier from us receiving Jesus. Perhaps you are exploring who this Jesus is. And I would encourage you to go on that journey, read, study, ask around, listen to stories. There is nothing unique about you that will block you from experiencing Jesus. There's an interesting part of the story about Malchus. We don't know how he responded. We don't know if he believed Jesus or he went back to his own way. And he said, oh, thanks for the healing, and I'll still be who I am. The text is purposely silent about this. Why? Because it raises the question for us. Very often you will hear some people say, well, you know what? If God just showed up here in front of me and said, I'm God, I will believe in God. But what's the problem with that? The problem is that if God showed up here, it's not a choice that I'm making. I would have no choice. It would go against my free will because I would be so overwhelmed that there is God in my midst that I will fall on my face. But here, Jesus is offering all of us a choice. He invites us to follow him. Malchus had a choice. While Jesus offered this tangible demonstration of his power and grace, the choice to believe is always ours as individuals. There is no one and nobody who can force or coerce you into believing Jesus. That's just impossible. It is a choice that you and I have to make as individuals. Second person in the story is Peter. The Bible never shows us characters that are purely evil or purely good. It always shows us the reality that all of us and every human we know is mixed. Even the greatest heroes in the Bible, their flaws are shown in good detail. And Peter is one of those. I just talked about some high moments. He recognized Jesus as the Messiah. He stepped out into the water and walked. Sure, he sank and Jesus said, you have little faith. But imagine the people in the boat. They didn't even bother to get out. They didn't try. So Peter is shown in the Gospels. There are at least 10 or 11 different instances where he fails really miserably. And it's interesting because Peter is going to become one of the big leaders once Jesus leaves the earth. And imagine that succession plan. You've got really big shoes to fill. And you'd imagine that the Gospels will present him as being, oh, he's perfect for the job. But no, it shows him fail over and over and over again. And increasingly more towards the end of Jesus' life. He declares him as Messiah. And Jesus immediately starts talking about his death. And Peter takes Jesus aside and says, I think you've missed the point. Let me tell you how it's supposed to be. And Jesus says, Satan, get behind me. Imagine hearing that from Jesus. It's like, oh, okay. In the few days before this story, um, Jesus tries to wash the feet of the disciples. Peter misunderstands. He says, no, 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 don't wash my feet. Jesus says, if I don't wash your feet, you're not part of this. He misses the point again. Then Jesus predicts that Peter is going to deny him. Because Peter goes and says, you know what, Jesus, if everyone else goes away, I'm going to be there for you. And Jesus is like, sure, yeah, exactly. And he says, no, you're going to deny me 3 times. And then Jesus is in the Garden of Gethsemane, and the disciples go to sleep. And the text says that Jesus goes and asks, Peter, why are you sleeping? How unfair. All the disciples are asleep, but he only asks Peter, why are you asleep? And imagine what's going through Peter's mind. Who can blame him for taking the sword out? His ego is hurt. He's trying to prove to Jesus, like, I'm going to be there for you. And so he swings a sword. What was his plan, actually? Because the disciples had 2 swords, and there was a group of people with a lot of swords. But you understand this moment of heightened emotions. But the text presents this to us to show Peter's pride being torn down, to show that after failure after failure after failure, he realizes that it's not in his own strength that he has to depend on God. Here's a sneak peek of this, how this story ends for Peter. Jesus was killed, he was arrested, he was killed, he was buried. 3 days later, some people go to the place where he was buried. An angel declares to those people saying, Jesus has risen, go into Galilee, and he will meet you there. Imagine if you are Peter in this instant. What are you feeling? On the one hand, you're feeling guilt and shame. You're feeling like a complete failure, like a hypocrite. And then these people come into your house and say, Jesus is alive, he is risen. What are you feeling now? You're feeling joy and confusion and excitement and suspicion. And then it hits you that the very last thing you did before Jesus died was deny him. When it counted the most, you said, I actually don't know that person. And maybe, what is Peter thinking? And he tentatively asks the people who came into his house, what did the angels say exactly? And do you know what the angel said? Go tell the disciples and Peter. Go tell the disciples and Peter. In that moment of extreme shame, feeling like a failure, the tenderness of God is wooing Peter back, saying, I've still got you. Come meet me. Go tell the disciples and Peter. Yes. That same tenderness is inviting us to God today. The third person in the story is Jesus. The miracles on their own are not presented as proof of his divinity. Others perform miracles. The disciples perform miracles. Jesus himself said that we will see greater signs than the ones that he performed. And so it's the miracles coupled with what he is claiming about himself and what he is teaching that point us to the fact that he is God. How do we know that? In John 18, what we read a little earlier, when the crowd came to the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus went out to meet them. And he asked, who is it that you want? And they said, Jesus of Nazareth. You might be thinking, like, shouldn't they know who he is? But imagine this is a time when there's no social media, there's no printing, there's nothing, right? It's dark. They've heard this story. I have to go and find some person called Jesus. They he asks, "Who is it you want?" They say, "Jesus of Nazareth." And he answers saying, "I am he." When we read that in English, it sounds right because it's grammatically fine. But the phrase he actually says is, "I am." When they heard it, they drew back and fell to the ground. Why? Because when they asked, "I want to see Jesus of Nazareth," he says, "I am." He is making a claim in that moment, saying, "I am that same God who in many seasons before has said, 'I am who I am.'" And they were afraid of that. Think about in that context. Jesus, in that moment, claiming, "I am God." And imagine the pettiness of Peter's sword swinging around. And he's saying, "Yeah, if I want, I can get 12 legions of angels to protect me." But in that context, think about Jesus voluntarily choosing to sacrifice himself for us. Philippians says, Jesus, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness and being found in appearance as a man. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. This miracle working God invites you today. I want you for a moment just to ponder, to think. You can close your eyes if you want. Perhaps you need a miracle today. Perhaps someone you know needs a miracle today. It could be healing, physical, mental, social, spiritual. Perhaps it's a miracle in relationships. Maybe your marriage is on the last leg, or their marriage is on the last leg. There's a family fight that has been going on for decades with no resolution in sight. There's stress at work and politics, and it feels like there is no opening for this. Think about those impossible situations in your life. Maybe there's a financial miracle. You're on the last rung. You have overwhelming debt. There's a financial mistake that you made, and now you're completely stuck. Maybe the miracle that you're thinking of is for someone to find Jesus. Someone you love, a spouse, a child, a parent, a sibling, a friend who has walked away from God or who has never found him, and you really want them to find Jesus. Come to Jesus. Ask for that miracle. But remember that the miracle is not just about the miracle. If you relate to Malchus in this story, I want to encourage you to remember that Jesus is available for all. If you seek him, you will find him. He knows you, he loves you, he knows your name, he knows the parts of your life that feel like darkness, that feel formless and empty and chaotic. And he is the God who brings beauty and order and life to these places. And so, yes, when you pray to him, you may receive a miracle, you may receive healing, you may receive a job or whatever else you pray for. But this invitation is so much more than that. This invitation is an invitation to connect with a God who is far beyond just answering prayers and healing bodies and providing jobs and food and walking on water. His invitation is an invitation to a relationship with him for eternity. Or maybe you relate to Peter in this story. And maybe you feel like you failed and you've missed the point and you've made error after error after error. And you keep making mistakes. And the invitation is to put our complete trust in God. I'm going to give you just a couple of minutes in your own space to pray, to ask God. It's just speaking to God, knowing that he's listening. If you need a miracle, pray in your own space. If you want to explore who Jesus is, ask more around after this. And if you feel like you keep failing, ask him to show you his way. At the end of this service, we're going to open up a space for prayer. If any of you want someone to pray with you, we will have that open over here, and you can come up and ask any of us for prayer. Specifically for what you've just thought about, or maybe for something else. But as we close, I want to give you one more nugget in this story. The invitation is for us to go up the mountain. We're going to go through this story one more time, and I want you to see something new. Where is the Garden of Gethsemane? Anyone? Yes? It was at the base of a mount called Mount of Olives. Okay. You know the drill now. Garden, mountain. What are we thinking of? Season 1, episode 1. First page of the Bible. Garden, mountain, sword. What are you thinking of now? Anyone know those three things in the first few pages of your Bible? Garden, mountain, sword. Cool. Genesis 1. In the very first few pages of the Bible, this is the story. God created humans. God created everything. He created humans. And then he said, all of this is good. This is for you. And the humans said, thank you very much. I'll do my own thing. I want to be my own God. And so they got thrown out of the garden. They got thrown out of this perfect relationship with God. And there was a flaming sword going back and forth at the entrance of the garden that would guard the way to the tree of life. Three things: garden, mountain, sword. Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, at the base of this mountain, John says that Jesus and the disciples went into the garden, and you should already be asking, how are they allowed in? The crowd came to find Jesus, and he went out and asked them. And John's probably implying that he went to the entrance of the garden. He went out to ask them, who are you looking for, or who do you want? And they said, Jesus of Nazareth. And he said, I am. The I am God has come out of the garden to the entrance of the garden and saying, I am. And then a sword emerges. And the sword tries to attack the person who is coming into the garden. And Jesus stops the sword and says, no more of this. And he reaches out to the very person trying to come in and heals. Fast forward the story. Jesus dies. He rises again. He reveals himself to many people who are eyewitnesses of him. And he goes back to that very mountain, the Mount of Olives, and he ascends into heaven, and he promises to come back to that same spot. If you could just come up. Now, if you are thinking in this moment, oh, so does that mean I have to buy a plane ticket and go to this Mount of Olives to meet God? You have missed the point. Please save your money. Don't buy the ticket. Because this mountain isn't a physical place. The garden and the mountain, the Eden story, isn't about us trying to go to a physical place, but it signifies this availability for us to have a perfect, undivided relationship with God. By our own choices, we rejected that. The relationship was broken and the way was blocked for us to enter into that perfect relationship with a flaming sword that blocked the way. And Jesus said, no more of this. And when he was dying on the cross, he said, it is finished. He said, I am that way back to the tree of life. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And someone once asked Jesus, so which mountain will we worship on? This one or that one? And he said, no, you've missed the point. It's not about a physical mountain. We will worship in spirit and truth. So we are going to worship now. And I'd encourage you to rise up in this moment as we sing this song. Thanks to what Jesus did on the cross, we have access into the Holy of Holies. This moment is Eden. This is our invitation to come up the mountain. This is the moment in which you and I are invited to walk with God, to recognize that Jesus, who walked on water, was the same who hovered over the waters before time began. This is the same God who is here with us now. He is hovering over those areas of our lives where there is chaos and darkness and formlessness and emptiness and despair, anxiety and fear, when it feels like there are waves and wind crashing around you. That is the same God. God, you are here. You are moving in our midst, and we worship you because you are worthy of all honor and glory and worship. The Spirit of the Lord is here. The Spirit of the Lord is here. The Spirit of the Lord is here. Would you open your hands, open your hearts, and just worship God? Because the Spirit of the Lord is here.
The atmosphere is changing now, for the Spirit of the Lord is here. The evidence is all around that the Spirit of the Lord is here. The atmosphere is changing now, for the Spirit of the Lord is here. The evidence is all around that the Spirit of the Lord is here. Overflow in this place, fill our hearts with your love. Your love surrounds us. You're the reason we came to encounter your love. Your love surrounds us. The atmosphere is changing now, for the Spirit of the Lord is here. The evidence is all around that the Spirit of the Lord is here. Overflow in this place, fill our hearts with your love. Your love surrounds us. You're the reason we came to encounter your love. Your love surrounds us. Your kingdom come, your will be done, here as in heaven. Spirit of God, fall fresh on us. We need your presence. Your kingdom come, your will be done, here as in heaven. Overflow in this place, fill our hearts with your love. Your love surrounds us. You're the reason we came to encounter your love. Your love surrounds us. Overflow in this place, fill our hearts with your love. Your love surrounds us. You're the reason we came to encounter your love. Your love surrounds us. A miracle can happen now, for the Spirit of the Lord is here. The evidence is all around that the Spirit of the Lord is here. A miracle can happen now, for the Spirit of the Lord is here. The evidence is all